Before we even touch the surface of what we are getting into today, I need everyone listening to do one thing right now. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed.
Yes, definitely do that.
Seriously, if you want these deep dives to keep coming, we need you locked in. Because today, today we're going into some territory that most people are, terrified to even whisper about at the dinner table.
It is certainly not a topic for the faint of heart. We're reviewing a text that positions itself not just as a book, but really as a weapon.
Exactly, a weapon. We are talking about the ebook, Say My Pronouns. Tyrannical Satanic Inversion, Violence Against Logic, Rhetoric, and Grammar by Conrad Riker.
Quite the title.
It is. And let me tell you, if you've been walking around lately feeling like, I don't know, the world has gone completely upside down, like up is down, men are women, and logic is suddenly considered hate speech, this book is basically the manual for what is happening to your brain.
Riker's premise is pretty stark. He argues that we are in the middle of a war, but it's not a war fought with guns or tanks, at least not yet. It's a war on reality itself.
Right.
And the primary battlefield, according to the author, is language.
Right, and he's not holding back punches here. He explicitly frames this deep dive, his book, for men who are awake, his words, to the shifting cultural landscape.
Yeah, the target audience is very clear.
If you, the listener, suspect that the institutions, universities, corporations, HR departments, the law, if you think they've been captured by feminists and Marxists, Riker's saying, you are right, you aren't crazy, and here's exactly how they did it.
It serves as a diagnostic tool for that capture. He's really trying to explain the mechanics of the machine.
So, look, we're going to go really long and deep on this. We're aiming for an ultra-long, incisive analysis, but we obviously can't cover everything. So right now, pull up Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy Say My Pronouns.
Highly recommend having the text in front of you.
Yeah, what we are discussing today is just the tip of the iceberg of the red pills contained in this thing. You need the full arsenal.
So let's start with the foundation. The book is subtitled Violence Against Logic, Rhetoric, and Grammar. Riker anchors his entire argument in this classical concept of the trivium.
The trivium. Okay, let's unpack this, because I think for most people, grammar is just that boring stuff you learn in third grade so you didn't, dangle participle or whatever.
Right, but Riker says it's way more than that. It's actually the operating system of the Western mind.
The operating system. I like that.
Historically, in Western education, going all the way back to the Greeks and Romans, the trivium was the threefold path to critical thinking. It's a hierarchy. First, you have grammar.
Okay.
Grammar is the mechanics of how we name reality. It answers the question, what is a thing? A tree is a tree. A man is a man.
So it's the input, the data entry.
Precisely. The second step is logic. Logic is how we process those names to find truth. We use it to check for contradictions.
Right, making sure the data makes sense.
And the third step is rhetoric, which is how we persuade others of that truth. Riker's argument, and this is really the key to the whole book, is that if you destroy the first step, grammar, the other two collapse instantly.
If you corrupt the data entry, the program crashes.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of satanic inversion comes in. This part was fascinating. He argues that the modern woke movement isn't just wrong or misguided, it's an inversion.
An inversion of reality.
Yes. It takes what is biologically true, like male and female, and calls it hate. And it takes what is a subjective delusion identity and calls it truth.
He calls it satanic not necessarily in a purely religious sense, though I guess that's there too, but in the sense that it is the direct opposite of creation. It's uncreating reality.
He describes it as breaking the link between language and reality. This is an ontological break, ontology being the study of being. When you break the link between the word and the thing it describes, you essentially induce a state of psychosis in the population.
Which brings us to that study. He cites a study from the University of Toronto in 2022 that really nails this.
Oh, that study was very revealing.
It was wild. Tell us about the anxiety levels they found.
So it found that students in faculties with forced pronoun declarations felt intense anxiety. But here is the nuance. They weren't anxious about offending people.
Right.
They weren't worried about being rude. They were anxious about being punished for a grammatical slip.
That is the compliance piece. The book compares it to Orwell's 1984 and Newspeak. The author is saying the point isn't to be kind. The point is to force you to say something you know isn't true.
Because if they can make you agree to a lie, they own you.
Exactly. Riker calls it the pronoun cult. It's not about inclusion, it's about submission.
And this transition from grammar as a tool for clarity to a tool for compliance creates what he calls a linguistic coup. When you are forced to use they for a single person who is clearly male or female, you aren't just being polite.
You're breaking your own brain.
You are dismantling the subject-predicate relationship that allows you to think clearly. You are engaging in a ritual of submission to a false reality.
It's literally making people dumber. It's dulling the blade of the mind. But let's look at who is driving this. Because the book traces this lineage back way before Twitter or TikTok or whatever. This goes back to the roots. Riker says we need to look at the Frankfurt School.
This is critical history for anyone trying to understand the current moment. Riker points directly to thinkers like Herbert Marcuse, Michel Foucault, and Jacques Derrida. The argument is classical Marxism, the struggle between economic classes, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
It failed.
Right, it failed.
The workers didn't revolt. They liked their refrigerators and their weekends off. Capitalism actually worked too well for the revolution to happen.
Precisely. So the strategy shifted. According to the book, they moved from economic Marxism to cultural Marxism. They shifted the struggle from class to identity.
And the goal changed.
The goal became dismantling Western logic, because logic was seen as a tool of patriarchal power. If Western civilization is built on reason, then to destroy the civilization, you must attack reason itself.
And now that ideology is wearing a suit and tie, or I guess a diversity pin, the book details how this infiltrated the corporate world. There's this incredible example in there of Google's pronoun norming training.
Yes, the Google example is striking.
The book alleges they explicitly teach that standard grammar is a tool of patriarchal control.
It's the weaponization of HR. Riker describes how HR departments use concepts like kindness and safety as Trojan horses. He actually cites the Harvard Business Review, which is hardly a right-wing outlet,
Not at all.
which admitted that forcing pronoun usage actually spikes workplace anxiety by 41% among those who oppose the policy.
41%. So you're creating a hostile work environment in the name of safety. But the scariest part for me, and this is where the red pill gets really hard to swallow, was the medical capture. Riker calls this the red pill of biology.
This is where the stakes literally become life and death. The book details an incident at a Vancouver hospital.
Oh man, this story.
A nurse was treating a patient in an urgent care situation. The patient was biologically male, but identified otherwise. The nurse used he while communicating vital medical information to other doctors.
Because in an emergency, biology matters. You need to know the chromosomal reality for medication, for heart rate, for everything.
Correct. But she got warned. In an urgent care setting,
Insane.
the hospital administration prioritized ideological compliance over medical accuracy. Riker argues this is the ultimate danger of the inversion. When ideology overrides biological reality, people get hurt. The map is no longer describing the territory.
It's this idea that feelings are the new facts, which leads us to the psychology of the people pushing this. Riker doesn't mince words here. He calls it the feminization of reason.
This is a very provocative concept in the book. He argues that our public discourse has shifted from masculine principles, debate, conflict, objective truth, facts over feelings,
Right.
to feminine principles, consensus, emotional safety, validation, and conflict avoidance.
Emotionalism as epistemology, meaning if I feel it, it's true. And if you use facts to hurt my feelings, you're essentially committing violence against me.
It fundamentally changes how we determine what is real. And Riker backs this up with some pretty damning psychological profiles. He cites a UC Berkeley study that analyzed DEI administrators.
This one blew my mind. What did they find?
The study found disproportionately high rates of narcissistic traits among those administrators.
Narcissism.
Yes, it suggests that the people enforcing these rules aren't doing it out of altruism. They aren't doing it because they're nice. Riker claims they're doing it out of a need for control and moral grandiosity. They get a dopamine hit from correcting you.
And there was another study from Stanford, right, linking pronoun enforcement to authoritarianism.
Yes. It found that obsessive pronoun enforcement correlates with lower cognitive flexibility and higher authoritarian traits.
So they're rigid.
Extremely. These are people who cannot handle nuance or disagreement. They demand total submission to their worldview. It's a very brittle way of thinking.
There's that story about the University of Oregon logic professor.
A classic example of this rigidity. He used syllogisms, basic logic puzzles, that challenged a student's identity claim. For example, premise AX is a man. Premise BX claims to be a woman. Conclusion: X is stating a contradiction.
And what happened?
He was suspended. The university effectively ruled that logic itself was aggressive.
Logic is aggressive. That is the world we are living in. If A plus B equals C and C hurts your feelings, then math is mean. And the book argues that the primary target of all this, the group that needs to be broken for this system to work, is men.
Riker posits that masculinity is rooted in objective reality. It deals with the physical world, hierarchies of competence, and harsh truths.
It deals with gravity, with weight, with the word no.
Exactly. Therefore, masculinity is the natural antibody to woke ideology. To make the ideology stick, you have to break the men.
And he brings the data on what happens when you break the men, specifically the fathers, the fatherlessness crisis. This section was heavy.
It's a crucial part of his argument. He cites a study from the University of Melbourne. It claimed that boys with strong father figures were 80% less likely to identify as non-binary.
80%. That is a massive statistic. It basically says that gender confusion is a symptom of fatherlessness.
Riker argues that fathers provide an anchor in biological reality. A mother's role is often to nurture and validate the internal world of the child, but the father's role, historically, is to introduce the child to the limits of the external world, to reality.
To say, no, you can't do that.
Exactly. When that anchor is gone, boys drift.
He compares it to the herbivore men in Japan, right? These guys who have just completely checked out of society, no ambition, no relationships, just video games and isolation. And the suicide rates in Sweden. It's a grim picture of what happens when you demonize traditional masculinity.
It creates a vacuum, and ideology rushes in to fill that vacuum. If a boy doesn't have a father telling him who he is, the internet will tell him.
So what's the solution? Because this is heavy, and it's really easy to get black-pilled here. But Riker doesn't just complain, he has a battle plan. This is the part of the book where he pivots to resistance.
The central pillar of his resistance is reclaiming the trivium. He argues men must relearn grammar, logic, and rhetoric, not for a grade, but as self-defense.
Mental martial arts.
You have to be able to dismantle a bad argument in real time. You need to be able to hear a claim like, men can get pregnant, and instantly identify the logical fallacy and the grammatical inversion.
He talks about this model called Stoic Sons. I love this. It's a mentorship program where they don't sit around talking about their feelings.
No, it's the exact opposite of a therapy circle. They do physical discipline, log carries, cold exposure, and they learn formal logic.
Bringing it back to the physical world.
It's about reintegrating the physical and the mental. If you can carry a heavy log, you understand gravity. If you understand gravity, you understand reality. It grounds the logic.
He shares an anecdote of a high school student in Wisconsin that I think is the perfect example of this in action.
Yes, the school tried to enforce a compelled speech pronoun policy. This student didn't scream or protest or get emotional. He went to court and used a syllogism to prove the policy was contradictory to the school's own biological curriculum.
Brilliant.
He effectively said, you teach biology in room 101 and you teach this policy in room 102. They cannot both be true.
And he won. That's the power of logic. It cuts through the noise like a laser.
But the most important directive Riker gives is actually simpler than court cases. It is the refusal to lie.
This is the heavy one. This is the one that asks something of every single listener right now.
Riker argues that participating in the lie of preferred pronouns, saying she, when you clearly see a man, is psychologically damaging to the speaker.
It breaks your own mind.
It creates profound cognitive dissonance. To maintain your sanity and your manhood, you must refuse to speak on truths.
Even if it costs you. Even if it's awkward. Even if the HR lady glares at you. He says the regime will eventually collapse because it contradicts reality, but only if men refuse to hold it up by lying.
It's a war of attrition. Reality is undefeated, but it requires witnesses. The system relies on your politeness. It relies on you being too nice to say, that isn't true.
Riker is saying, stop being nice, start being truthful.
Exactly.
So look, we have barely scratched the surface here. This book is dense, it is aggressive, and it is packed with data and history, specifically about the capture of our legal systems that we just don't even have time to cover today.
It fundamentally challenges the way we look at the words coming out of our own mouths. It's really a manual for mental sovereignty.
Exactly. You need to read Say My Pronouns by Conrad Riker. Go to Amazon Kindle, go to Google Play Books. Get it now. It's a weapon you need in your arsenal. Don't just listen to us talk about it, get the source material.
And for ongoing updates, Riker is very active. You can follow him at Conrad Riker on Twitter and check out his Substack at conradriker.substack.com. He's always posting new analysis on a long march through the institutions.
The book ends with this thought. The current regime will collapse. It has to. It contradicts nature. But it only collapses if men refuse to look away and refuse to lie.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The power is in your refusal to participate in the delusion.
Heavy stuff, but necessary. And it makes me think, if we surrender biological reality in our language today, what happens tomorrow? Are we just priming ourselves to surrender physical reality entirely? To just accept whatever virtual or corporate reality is fed to us by AI? It's something to think about.
A chilling thought, for sure.
Make sure you like and subscribe to the deep dive so we can keep bringing you this kind of heat. We'll see you next time. Stay awake.